Look closely at this Tintoretto oil sketch. This is one of the strongest examples I've found of a Renaissance composition organized by an underlying circle geometry. This is a work in progress. I saw this painting for the first time just a few weeks ago at the Met, and I was struck by how clear some of the compass marks are in the background. This is an oil sketch of Doge Alvise Mocenigo being presented to the Redeemer. So there's the Doge in the center in front of this column. And here's Christ the Redeemer off on the left. And a group of figures on the right, cardinals, presumably fathers of the church. And down here in the foreground, in that dark blob right there, the Lion of St. Mark. So here's the largest diameter on the sheet, and this demonstrates that the composition is 1 to 2 in proportion. So the diameter is as wide as the painting itself and as high as the radius. And you can already see some compositional elements being regulated by this geometry. And you can also see evidence of compass marks, such as right there, sweeping up to the center, which is directly on this column that the Doge is standing in front of. And if you look at the Doge himself, you can see that this edge of his contour of the profile is picked up by that arc. And over here on the side, you can see compass marks and guidelines sweeping in and out of this vertical line that I'm drawing. Up to the top and down at the bottom, you can see lots of arcs and sweeps and holes, presumably where compasses were, the points of the compass were pressed into the gesso undercoat ground of the painting. I'm just tracing random arcs as I see them. So there's the center line, the bottom edge, the top edge, and this column edge over here is picked up by that line. So that's the primary diameter. And here is the second diameter, 1 to 2. These are exactly 1/2 the diameter of the previous. And here, again, we can see lots of alignments between the robes of the Doge, for example. Right here, you can actually see the compass mark. Over here, we can see the line of this angel accompanying Christ up over the shoulder of that angel. And that picks up quite closely the front forward corner of the Doge's palace. This is taking place in San Marco, this presentation of the Redeemer. Christ himself is following this line. And if we swing over to the right side of the painting, we can see a very important point right there. And arcs swinging up. Directly on the line of the joined hands of these figures. And over here, the legs of this figure, the sweep of this robe, and again that column on the right side of the composition. It also is picking up the line of the arc of the figures themselves. Right there, right there. So that's the second circle grid layer. And now the third circle grid layer seems to be the most consequential of them all. So I'm going to turn off those trace layers, leave on the third layer, and float around and see what we can find. Turn on another tracing layer and change the color. And so now here, now I'm going to be making adjustments to this as I'm showing it to you, because this is very much a work in progress. But look at these figures here, the chest and torso of Christ the Redeemer, his robes, his foot, clear compass marks passing across his foot right there. Clear compass marks right there as well. And in the background, up there in the corner, again, we zoom in, lots of arcs. You can see that whoever swung the compass across this prepared canvas, they did so with great haste, because this is, after all, just a study for the composition. And right here, you can see some very clear compass marks that are following this diameter. And they continue up and are actually off by a bit. I'm not sure if that's the same diameter or not, but you can see these arcs in the background that are compass marks. Sweeping down to the bottom, directly in line with the center of the whole composition. And the robes of the Doge himself. Picks up the line at that top step. You can see these guidelines here and there on the painting. Those look like guidelines there, for example. An orthographic grid laid down. The arm of this figure follows that radius. Picks up the corner of the Library of San Marco. And this figure, look at these robes. Over here as well. The shoulder of this figure. The eye line of this figure. And to the other side of, whenever you see a seam between figures like this, it's a telltale sign that there might be large radii meeting tangentially right at the seam between the figures. And we see the same thing happening here. Comes down and blends into this figure's robes. Look at that arc. Again, you can see in the background telltale signs of compass marks, presumably. Right down like so. And like so. Let's see if we've missed any. The edge of that column again. The angle of the torso of this figure. Corner of the Library of San Marco. Again, we can see what look like compass marks. Center line of the whole composition. Picks up the top of the Doge's hat. And it picks up this edge of the contour of the Doge. So there you have it. 1/3. And now I'll turn off that trace layer, go down to 1/6. And I've already traced a lot of the marks that this diameter seems to be consequential for. And I'll turn those on right here. So if I flash the circles on and off, and we focus on one part of the composition, you can see how consequential that layer is as well. This is 1/6 the largest diameter. And down there, the lion. Robes, gestures, bend of arms and torsos, the seams between figures, and the general dynamic of the painting. So what this provided Tintoretto with was a way of creating a visual harmony between the parts without necessarily following these geometries like a straitjacket. It provided the opportunity to sweep from one diameter to another, creating continuous lines that connect the various parts of the composition together, read only perhaps subconsciously. And let me turn on the 12th layer quickly. And I'll turn on a previous layer that I've traced here. Right there. Turn those ones off, turn these ones on. So again, the scale breaks down from large gestures sweeping from one form into another to the individual anatomical elements of the figures themselves. And now I'll turn on all of these trace layers. And if I turn off the painting, you can almost see the composition just in the lines that I've traced. So now I'll turn off all the trace layers and turn on the circle diameters one by one again. Here's the primary diameter. 1/2 that diameter. 1/3 the primary diameter. 1/6 the primary diameter. And 1/12. And it may even go down to 1/24. If these ones are indeed there, they were probably applied with a template rather than a compass. Turn off the larger layer so you can just see the 1/24. There do seem to be a lot of elements that follow that quite precisely. But that diameter wouldn't necessarily have to be drawn because it would be implied by the orthographic grid that had to have been put down. If the circles were drawn from small to large, you would need to have a grid like this in order to know where to place the compass points. If it was drawn with the largest circles breaking down just simply by having the radius of the compass points, the distance between the compass points, you can pretty quickly and easily go from the largest down to the smallest simply through that process of subdivision. But there does seem to be evidence of an orthographic grid across this surface. And there you go. Thank you for watching.